Previous to the Reformation, Christians, for example, in the monolithic church scene of Rome, if they had disputes, could appeal to the church to render a verdict. And when the church gave the verdict, that settled the controversy because the authority of the church was deemed to be at least sacrosanct and at best infallible. And with the challenge to the authority of the church that came with the Protestant Reformation, then the whole question of how can we know anything for sure became a serious problem for people. And not only did you break down and collapse of scientific authority, because in addition to the Reformation that occurred in the 16th century, also in the 16th century, the Copernican revolution in astronomy took place, which created the enormous crisis of the tradition of scientific authority that had followed in the wake of the ancient Ptolemaic system of the universe. And Copernicus upset that apple cart and raised all kinds of questions about the trustworthiness of science. The controversy over the Copernican revolution carried over into the 17th century, where the Galileo episode became prominent in the life of the church, where Galileo, with the use of his telescope, was confirming the mathematical theories of the 16th century astronomers by pointing his telescope into the heavens and demonstrating the verification of these theories of the 16th century. So not only in theology and philosophy, but also in science, there was a crisis of authority. And what Descartes was trying to do in his philosophical inquiry was to reestablish some foundation for certainty with respect to truth. And he was looking for what he called clear and distinct ideas, ideas that were indubitable, ideas that could not be rejected without rejecting reason at the same time, which ideas could then form a foundation for the reconstruction of knowledge, whether in the scientific sphere or in the theological philosophical arena. And so the process that Descartes followed in order to achieve certainty was to follow a plan of uncertainty or of skepticism. What he did was he embarked upon a rigorous pursuit of skepticism in which he sought to bring doubt upon everything he could conceivably doubt. In other words, he wanted to give the second glance to every assumed truth that people held. And he asked questions, the epistemological question, do we really know that this is true? Sometimes I like to go back to first principles myself, and in fact, my whole bent in philosophical inquiry is to keep coming back to foundational principles, to the fundamental truths. And I'll often make a list, and I'll say to myself, what are 10 things that I know for sure? And I'll write them down, and then I'll subject those 10 things to the most rigorous criticism I can to make sure that I'm not just believing them because somebody I liked taught them to me, or because of my love lines, my traditions, the subculture in which I come from. I want to know, how do I know that these things that I think are true really are true? And that principle is one of the most important principles for breakthroughs in any kind of knowledge. One of the great principles for new discoveries is the principle of challenging assumptions, because that's how philosophers break through, musicians break through, that's how scientists break through, where they challenge assumptions that previous generations have been made and accepted uncritically and passed on from generation to generation. That's how the Ptolemaic system survived for over 1,000 years, is by people accepting theories without the theories ever having been proved. And so we need to do that ourselves, subject our own thinking to a rigorous cross-examination. Because you've all seen what happens in trials where you hear somebody give their case and you hear one side of it and it makes sense and you're sitting there nodding, yes, 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 until the cross-examination comes and people begin to raise questions about the testimony that you've heard. And by the time you're done listening to both sides, you're not sure who's telling the truth. And so there's something valuable in that. That doesn't mean you have to surrender to skepticism. But this is what Descartes was doing. He says, I'm going to doubt everything I can conceivably doubt. I'm going to doubt what I see with my eyes and what I hear with my ears, because I understand that my senses can be deceived. And we've talked about that, going back to Augustine's bent oar, that you look in the water and the oar looks like it's bent. And this is what Descartes did. And he said, not only that, maybe this world is controlled by the great deceiver, a great satanic, demonic being who is a liar, who constantly gives me a false view of reality. And that maybe he is the master of illusion. And so he keeps bringing these illusions in front of me to deceive me. How can I know that reality is as I perceive it to be? Remember, back to the basic foundational principles we started with, one of which was the basic reliability of sense perception. Because if we cannot trust our senses in the basic rudimentary forms, then we have no way of getting outside the interior of our minds and making contact with an external world. And this is what is known as the subject-object problem. How do I know that the objective world out there is as I perceive it from within my own subjective perspective? And as I say, Descartes was acutely conscious of that. So he came up with some of the most preposterous possibilities. And he said, now maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense to think of a great deceiver producing this vast illusion out there, but it's possible. And he said, and so if it's possible, then I can't know for sure that reality is as I perceive it to be. So again, what can I know for sure? Well, after he went through this elaborate doubting process, he came to his famous motto or slogan, for which he is so well known, the cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. He said, no matter how skeptical I become, the one thing that I cannot doubt whenever I'm doubting what it is that I'm doubting is, because if I doubt that I'm doubting, it's necessary for me to doubt that I'm doubting, so that if I doubt that I'm doubting, I have to doubt that I'm doubting. So there's no way I can escape the reality of doubt. You say, well, I doubt it. Well, if you say I doubt it, you have proven the very point in dispute. He says, the one thing about which there's no doubt is that I'm doubting. Because if you doubt that, you prove my premise. And so he came to the conclusion there's no doubt that I'm doubting.